If I can ask, what led you to this career path?
Yeah, and there definitely is a story behind it. I'm one of those where I needed it myself, and so I had to learn it. And then I'm so passionate about it because I don't want other people to go through what I went through. When I was little, I actually planned on becoming a veterinarian. My dad is a third generation vet. I love animals. I worked at his vet clinic when I was very young, loved it. And then I got sick. What I didn't know at the time is I picked up Lyme disease and Bartonella, H. pylori, you name a parasite, I had it. And all these infections just piled up on one another. And I was just so sick. By the time I was in college, I could hardly function. And I had seen conventional doctors, went to a bunch of holistic doctors. I liked the holistic approach, but at that point, it was so basic. It's, oh, you have gut issues, here, take this enzyme. Here, take this hydrochloric acid tablet. And if it helps a little bit, but I have major issues, this is not going to get me functioning. And so that's where it's okay, I have to dig deeper. And so I started learning about functional medicine and going into the tests like, oh, we can actually send in our poop and they can analyze it and see what exactly is going on in here and start getting into advanced testing. And that's where I was able to finally identify all these infections I had and start to tackle them one by one and start to restore my health. So it is quite the journey, but it's something where other people, they didn't, again, this was back in the day a little while ago where functional medicine was in its infancy, but it was more just, okay, we're just going to give you something natural in place of the drug. And it's like, we need to actually figure out what's the root cause, what's actually going wrong, instead of just giving another band aid. So that's where I love the functional medicine and why I become so passionate about teaching other practitioners. I believe these functional lab tests help identify the root cause of the issues, and then we know how to really target our protocols to help the patient or the client.
I never would wish these bad things on someone, but I got to say it is so cool sometimes, and it's almost hard to believe that this isn't like why you're here in a sense, because it's like you get these people that have these illnesses or diseases or whatever, and then look at the contribution that they make to the world because that happened to them. And I'm sure you still would have helped out a bunch of amazing animals or something if you became a veterinarian, but the bottom line is it's because we go through these things that triggers this passion that, man, it never goes away. And I always say for myself, I was sick from the age of basically 5 until 18, 19 years old. And as much as that sucked, and quite frankly, especially the teenage years, I almost felt like I had that stripped away from me in some sense. I wouldn't change it because the trade-off is I have found so many of my friends who I love to death, but they graduate high school and college and they get into these career paths that pay the bills, but they're not necessarily passionate about. So it's almost like they had the childhood and teenage years and then the rest of their life is not their favorite thing, where I feel
Mhm.
like I gave up those initial years, but the trade-off is I get to do what I love for the rest of my life and really impact people. And ideally, you could do it in both phases, right? We could still have the cake and eat it too,
Yep.
gluten-free, of course, seed oil-free, all that stuff. But in this case, I wouldn't change it. You are clearly very passionate about many things in this functional medicine space. Today, we're talking about stool testing, and we're going to get into the GI map itself. I want to talk about a high-level overview first. So the infection side of things, to me, this is something that I still get confused about. So here's what I'm getting at. As an FDN practitioner, Reed Davis came up with his system of labs and he worked with all these people to come up with that. So I get why that's unique and I get why that's something that Western medicine might not look at in the same way because it's like basically this really smart hippie dude did a system of labs with 11,000 people and came up with something truly unique. I think even if he was here, he could still say he recognizes why they don't teach that at medical school yet, even though it would be amazing if they did. What
Yeah.
I do not understand is how Western medicine is not on board with the long term implications of some of these chronic infections. It seems that they only look at them in acute senses and never really look at them from the long term side. So, one, I'd like you to correct me if you think that's incorrect. That's totally fine. And two, if I am correct in my assumption, why is it that we have so much science around what these things can do to the body, and yet Western medicine doesn't look at some of these chronic infections that we find in stool in the same way that we do?
I know. And it's so unfortunate. I completely agree. The research is there, but I think they say, what is it, like 20, 30 years for what's coming out in the research to actually be implemented in clinical practice. So they're just behind the times. And if we're looking at cutting edge, it's okay, there is a link between, let's say, blastocystis hominis and Hashimoto. Say if I have a client coming to me who's been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, I'm looking for H. pylori, I'm looking for blastocystis hominis, I'm looking for Yersinia, I'm looking for yeast. And this is all just straight from the research. We know there's a connection. Yet you go to your conventional physician, and their whole treatment regime for Hashimoto's is what I was told because I had Hashimoto's was, well, basically, we're just going to let the autoimmune process completely destroy your thyroid gland, and then we're going to give you Synthroid, one of the 5 hormones that the thyroid gland makes. And then you're just going to be on it lifelong because your thyroid gland has been destroyed. That wasn't acceptable to me. It's first, you're not replacing all the thyroid hormones. And second, you're waiting for the end process where my thyroid has been completely destroyed. I'd like to stop the progression of that now if I could, and then maybe choose a better medication if there is enough destruction that has already taken place. So again, it's like they aren't looking at the full picture, even though they could. The research is there, the testing is available. It isn't happening. Hopefully someday, but just not yet.
Okay, and for those that don't know what she's referring to, and actually, I'm not this smart. I just saw this the other day again. I was reminded of it, so that's why I have the numbers in my head. It's something like 17, it takes 17 years for 50% of
Mm.
these doctors and health practitioners to actually adopt what the science shows. So your 20 to 30 year estimate is probably correct for almost all of them to adopt it.
Yeah.
And I would assume some of that's probably going to change in this world of AI. AI is like social media, right? There's amazing things and there's bad things that come with it. I think one of the amazing things will be that this information gets utilized a lot quicker. That's my personal prediction. I'm not saying I'm right, but that's what I would bet on. But yeah, right now, guys, we've been living in a world where what we just said is not an opinion. It's actually been shown that it takes 17 years for 50% of these Western professionals to actually adopt this stuff. We are behind. And if you wonder why don't they spend all their time learning it, it's probably because they're spending their time handling 30 to 50 patients in a day, right? So they're so overloaded. And I know, Lisa, this is your philosophy as well. I always just make sure we state this every time for someone that's new to the show or podcast. This is not anti-Western medicine. This is just being realistic about where we're at. And these people are going through so much every day. They also have families. They got a dog at home, probably. They have other responsibilities outside of these 30 to 50 people they need to see each day, 5 days a week. So, believe it or not, they don't always have the time to be listening to 10 podcasts in a week like some of us do. And podcasts is not necessarily always where you should get your information from. Everything that we share here, you should always fact check yourself because, unfortunately, if I talk long enough, I'm going to say something wrong. If our guests talk long enough, that's probably going to happen to them too. So, just something to always think about that this latest information is being brought out in these alternative means, and the doctors normally don't have the time to listen to it, or I think this is fair to say, sometimes we get shot down a little bit. I think that's happening less and less as more and more chronic disease is happening, again, for better or for worse. But historically speaking, it's like I went to school for 12 years and did residency and all this stuff. Why should we be listening here? And the reality is we should be listening because the stats are very clear. We're all getting sicker and sicker despite more people having access to Western medicine than ever before.
There definitely is a sequencing strategy, and some of it is individualized. If someone is in such terrible discomfort, we do have to do a little bit of symptom relief first. Certainly, going out and blasting and killing bugs when a person is so uncomfortable, so inflamed, it's just not going to be our starting point. So actually for me, I always start with the last page of the report when I'm supporting the client. So if they can't digest food, I'm getting the enzymes in there. If their immune system is burned out, their secretory IgA is very low, I'm supporting their gut immunity. I'm going to build that army so that if there are things I need to go out and kill, the immune system is actually going to help out in that killing process. And if they're highly inflamed, if their calprotectin's through the roof, again, I'm not going to start adding to the inflammation by killing a bunch of pro-inflammatory bugs. I'm going to calm down the inflammation first. So I actually start with the intestinal health markers section first before I even think about killing anything.
Okay.
And then there's a north to south progression. That's what we're taught from a holistic standpoint, where H. pylori is in the stomach. And the problem is H. pylori is notorious for suppressing stomach acid. And you can think of your hydrochloric acid or your stomach acid as your lead digestive domino. So if you don't have the good stomach acid, if H. pylori is neutralizing it, you may have a problem with bile secretion. You may have a problem with pancreatic enzyme secretion. So everything just goes to pot and doesn't work well. That's where if H. pylori is there, I go after that first in almost every case. Now, say someone just picked up Giardia. They just went swimming in a lake in Colorado. They got a mouthful of water and had Giardia in it, and they're
Mhm.
in the throes of acute explosive diarrhea and super sick, and their Giardia is off the charts high. Yeah, I'm probably going to treat the acute parasite first. But barring that, a lot of people, when we're doing the tests, we're dealing with people who have chronic infections. So then I'm trying to fix them. If I fix the upper GI first, get the H. pylori cleared out, it's just going to be a lot easier to get the bacteria to come in balance, the yeast, the parasites, because everything is just going to work better if we fix that stomach first.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, yeah, you're building up the resilience of the person. That's like the low hanging fruit in that sense. So that, yes, if we do go after something a little stronger, of course, a body that is more well off is going to be able to handle that better. They might experience less die off symptoms, or if they're really lucky, none at all. That's usually not the case, but sometimes that could happen. I got to pause for a second and say, too, because you know how stressed I was about my camera, my normal camera not working. It took me until right now to realize that you have the little poop emoji thing basically in real life in your background, and that is both adorable and hilarious. So you definitely walk the walk over there. Um,
I
by, by the
do.
way, as we get closer to the 30-minute mark, guys, we're not quite there yet, but always feel free to throw any questions that you have in the chat. It's pretty rare that we get someone exactly like Lisa on the show. So if you have any questions about the GI map or stool testing in general, please let us know in the chat. We'd love to see it. Something else that I was curious about, I'm more asking this not because I don't think FDNs know this, I think they do, but because some of them struggle with the wording to their clients. A lot of people, when they come to us, seem to have an issue comprehending how they got these gut bugs. So I'm talking totally from the layperson perspective. You probably know what I mean. I'm not saying like a dumb person, just an otherwise reasonably intelligent person that knows nothing about holistic health and then has something like psoriasis. They almost find it somewhat hard to believe when I'm like, oh yeah, you could have this, that, their next thing. And then we get the results back, and sure enough, they do have parasites and stuff. And they're like, wait, one, how did I get this? Two, how is this related to my skin issue? So, from my understanding, the way that I've always tried to explain it is that if we're under chronic stress, then one of the first things that goes in our body is our ability to digest stuff properly. We actually are going to have depleted stomach acid anyway. You mentioned that in relation to H. pylori infections, but frankly, if you're under chronic stress, you're going to have depleted stomach acid as well. And I've always looked at that as the simpler explanation that if we're running around under chronic stress, we're exposed to these pathogens anyway, and now you created an environment basically where they can make camp and take over. I feel like sometimes that's probably too simple of an explanation. Is there another way that you explain this to people in terms of like why do so many people have these chronic infections? And then even more confusing is like how do they relate to these conditions that many people would think are totally unrelated? Oh, my psoriasis might have something to do with a parasite that I have. That's incomprehensible to most people if they're not in this space. That's two questions in one, so I'll start with that first one. How do you help explain to the lay person how they could have accumulated chronic infections if their symptoms don't seem to have anything to do with what most people would assume are chronic infection symptoms, such as GI symptoms?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes back to vulnerability. So, like you said, stress is a major one. Who doesn't go through some period of stress? Whether you're a high schooler and you're preparing for your SAT, or you just have a big exam, or something like that, or even happy stress, getting married, something like that, having a child. It's happy stress, but it's stress. And so, for the body, it can't always differentiate. Stress is stress. And so the stress will tend to lower your stomach acid. And stomach acid is like our first line of defense. So it's protecting us from the bacteria on the food, the parasites on the food. And you don't have to go to a third world country. We have parasites, E. coli, salmonella, norovirus. We see outbreaks of these all the time. I mean, there was just a huge outbreak on lettuce that actually killed some people with E. coli. So that's where having good stomach acid is so important, because if you swallow it, whether it's coming in the water you drink, so water, we also have to look at things like that. These bugs can be in your well water if it's unfiltered. Even some things like Giardia, Cryptosporidium, they're very chlorine resistant. So you could even have chlorinated city water and it could come through. But yeah, stomach acid, if you're drinking it in the water, you're eating it on the food, if you have low stomach acid, you can't kill it when you swallow it. So it's more likely there's going to be more making it through the stomach into the intestinal tract that could then cause an infection. Now, we also have secretory IgA. So, say it gets past the stomach. Secretory IgA is looking around for stuff and going, uh oh, that salmonella doesn't belong here. They're going to attack it, they're going to engulf it, and try to get it out of the body. Again, stress can cause low secretory IgA. Other things can cause, we need good beneficial bacteria like our butyrate producers to stimulate the production of SIG-A. We need vitamin A and D and zinc for secretory IgA. We even need zinc for stomach acid. So, how many people, it's nutritional deficiencies, it's stress, all these things. Your secretory IgA is low, making you vulnerable. Your stomach acid is low, making you vulnerable. And then, the like lettuce, there's so many little nooks and crevices in the lettuce leaves. These things can hide even if you're washing them. Or what I call the hairy berries, like a raspberry for me is like a hairy berry. It has all these little hairs versus like a blueberry is nice and smooth. So it's a lot easier to wash things off of a smooth berry than a hairy berry. And so these things that you ingest them. And so that's where we rely on the body's defenses. They have to be strong to protect us.